Okay, good morning and welcome to the August 12th meeting of SIG Apps. I'm gonna go ahead and get the meeting minutes and post them in the chat. We've got a demo today from something that's pretty cool from Bryan Liles of Heptio, VMware now, Bryan? But first, a few announcements. We're going to finally cut an app CRD release this week. That's one. And this is going to be our first week doing bi-weekly meetings. This was kind of something that was proposed and that the community seems to desire. Everyone seems fine with it. If there's any problems with that, please let us know on the mailing list or during this meeting. But now back to the demo. Bryan, if you're there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Cool.
Yeah, I had my sound routed somewhere else, so okay. I didn't even hear you. So you ready for me to demo? I can do that right now. Let me share a window here.
A pretty cool solution that gets rid of something that allows me to get rid of something that I don't want to support anymore.
All right, so I'm Bryan Liles, engineer at VMware, and over the past few months, we've been working on this tool that is now named Octant. The reason this existed is because Joe Bate and I were talking last summer, about just projects in the space, and after we decided to sunset KSonnet, we were going to do something else. And he said, well, how do I know if my workloads are working? And we went through a whole bunch of scenarios and figuring this out. But what we came down to was a tool. We were going to build a tool that would allow you to show if your workloads are working in a graphical way. Because tools like kube control and all the other tools in the space are great if you know how to use them. But everyone knows how to click. So we started iterating on that idea. And then what happened is we realized that there was a lot of context around this. So we ended up saying, well, we're going to need a dashboard. And truth be told, we did look at the Kubernetes dashboard, but I am not an AngularJS expert, and we didn't want to support a community dashboard. So we just ended up writing one. And what I'm going to show you today is a tool, but I'm going to show you, because we're only going to do this in a few minutes, I'm going to show you in a scenario. So I'm a developer. I have a site. I created this cluster this morning. It's on DigitalOcean. It's demo.demo1.doapps.bryanl.dev. And I go to their website and it doesn't work. And if you're a developer who isn't really in tune with Kubernetes, because you're not a Kubernetes expert, you're an expert at delivering software, this can be a little bit daunting. So we can use Octant to actually do this. So what is Octant? It's a dashboard, shows you information. Ultimately, we're going to get it to updating a whole bunch of information. But the neat part about it is that it builds the context that you require, because we can extend it through plugins. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So with Octant, what you have is a view of a cluster, and it's namespaced. And then you can always see your cluster scoped objects as well. So we're looking at defaults. As a developer, I do know that my application is running in demo, and in demo, we can see the whole namespace, and the whole namespace is we split it up into workloads and RBAC and custom resources and config and storage and things like that, just so you can find things. So here's a list of everything running in this namespace. So without knowing too much about this, well, I can see that there are pods running. And if I click on this pod, I can see that, and I can go down here to the events, says that it started it. And other things that I can do is I can go on to logs. Looks like it's running. And then something else I might want to do is actually, is this thing even listening in the cluster? So the reason this feature is actually in this tool is because kube control port forward just boggles my mind, and I hate doing it. So we added a port forwarding right in the app. And all right, well, the app is up and it's running fine, but we still can't see why it's not working. So the original reason we wrote this was to show this resource. So what we do is we go through the Kubernetes API and we create a DAG of objects that are connected. And we'll see here that there are some pods, a replica set, a deployment, and a service account. But wait a second, there's no service. So there's no way anyone can talk to it, and there's no ingress, and this should have an ingress. So let's go look at this thing. There's YAML that we just have out here that you can actually view. In the future, you'll be able to edit this here with context. And what I'm looking for here is actually just the labels for this pod. So pod labels at HTTP bin. So let's go look at my services. And if I look at my services, I have an HTTP bin service. And I look at it, and right off the bat, I can tell that the selectors for this thing is invalid. And if I actually go to the resource viewer for this, because I can also view this thing in context, the service says, well, it has no endpoints because it doesn't match any pods. So this service could not serve traffic. And then we can also see that the ingress is broken as well, and we'll go fix that next. So what I'm going to do here is, because I don't have an editor for everything in here, I'm just going to edit it outside of the app real quick. All right. So just pretend that cool things are happening over here. So I've updated the service now on the back end, just using kube control edit. And now what we're able to see is more things. Now because the pods or the service knows about endpoints, it can now see pods. So we have even bigger graph. So if we were to go back to this, it still wouldn't work because this ingress right here is red as well. So let's go, I'm gonna fix that ingress. And actually, let's go look at this ingress before we fix it. It says, this is the reason why it thinks it's not working. It says backend for service HTTP bin specifies an invalid port. What we've done here is we built a system where we can actually write checks for objects to make sure they're correct. And one of the checks for an ingress is actually looking at the service and seeing if the ports match up. So if we go look at this bad boy and we look at the YAML for it, what we'll notice is that the service name is HTTP bin and the service port is 80. But if we go back to the service, we notice that it's listening on 8080. So let me go fix this one too. All right. Once again, cool things are happening. All right. So we go back and we look at this thing here and we look at our resource viewer. It quickly updated itself. This is all real time. And the way that it works, just because I'm talking to SIG Apps, is that we actually maintain a section of, or a group of informers. And we hook up the informers whenever we go to a namespace. And we're using the informers to do all these things. So now that I have all of my, everything is back green, when I go to my website pops up. Pretty cool. And what we're trying to do here is help people get context so they can actually figure out how to solve their own problems. But we can do better than that. So one thing that we noticed in the space was everyone's moving to CRDs. And the problem with the CRD is, well, how do you see a CRD? Well, you can do kube control get CRD name, and then you can try to figure out, look in the spec names and try to figure out what the resource name is, and then look to see if it's cluster names, if it's cluster scoped or namespace scoped. But now we can get rid of all that. So what Octant does is it displays your namespace CRDs in the namespace, and it shows the cluster scope ones in the cluster overview. And the neat part about this is that as CRDs are added, this list will update. So you notice this list has 4 items in it. It's only showing these 4 items because it sees resources for them. If it didn't, it wouldn't show anything. So what can Octant do for CRDs? Well, I'll show you something pretty neat here. If your CRD has custom columns, Octant will actually take advantage of it, just like kubectl get. So this right here, all these columns are dynamic. And even better yet, what we can do is, because we can look in spec and we can look in status and use that as convention, we can actually build up, our configuration and basically our output basically dynamically. We don't know anything about this. But not all CRDs display this information. So a good example would be like this orders one. Oh, let me find one that's not good. Okay. Sometimes we don't get custom columns. So the cluster issuer from JetStack Cert Manager doesn't really show anything, so we can't build up anything on this. But let me show you something else we can do as well. And this is something that we're building on, that we're going to introduce an easier way to access this in our next release. So we have this concept of plugins. And why we created plugins is because with CRDs, and actually just data in Kubernetes in general, there's no way that we could code up a solution that would solve all the problems. So we decided to give the users and plugin authors an interface that they can create. So what can you do with plugins? Well, let me show you something here real quick. So I have 2 plugins installed, and we can actually see them. There's a cron demo, and then there's just a regular old demo plugin that I put in here. And they do 2 different things. So one of the plugins, let me go to a different namespace that has pods in it, actually can embellish existing information. So on this particular screen, what's going on is that the plugin was able to update the configuration information, the status information, and then down at the bottom, it was able to create its own output that we could actually embed in. And one else thing it can do is that we can actually create new tabs. So that's kind of cool. Another thing we can do with plugins is we can also say, we don't have to work with just built-in types. We can also work with CRDs. So I found this cron tab CRD demo, and I created it. But now I created a cron tab plugin that actually can show extra output and show an extra screen. So let's say if you wanted a cron tab editor, this is a dynamic editor in the plugin. Octant does not know anything about it. So we'll just change our cron tab a little bit so we can see. So what it's actually doing is it's going to the API. It made the change, and we're just waiting for the API to update. We might come back to this one. This is a DigitalOcean cluster, and my master nodes are a little bit slow today. So let's see what else that I can show you all. Oh, here's something else I can show you. Not only can plugins embellish existing objects, but they can also change the UI. So the sample plugin actually creates a new menu structure that just gets put in at the bottom. And actually, there's one here for cron tabs too. It gets put in here at the bottom, and it gets its own routing. So I'll show you how this works. So I'm in this custom plugin. This code is actually not in Octant at all, and I'm changing my current URI. And what you'll notice is that that card, it says my card tab 2, it's changing because it actually is looking at the path. So what are we doing with Octant? Well, right now what we're doing is working on making the things so it should be obvious. So we're working on fixing crashing bugs, and things should be obvious. If I go look at a, let's say if I go look at a deployment real quick here, let me go back to my demo namespace, and I look at a deployment, not only giving you this information, but giving you context of what you can do with this information, and allowing you to edit where you want to edit, and then basically just work with the cluster in the way that you want to work with it. Another thing that we're doing is creating a platform for our plugin authors, because you'll notice that we have access to metrics. We're not showing them because I didn't want to actually have opinions. We want to work with Kubemetrics, and we want to work with even other providers to be able to embed pod and even deployment statistics right in this page. We actually have the ability to do that. And then also what we really what we want to do is think about making this an application, kind of like the GitHub tool from GitHub that works on Windows and the Mac, and just making it feel like Kubernetes is part of an application rather than the scary thing that we have to deal with. So I'm going to stop there. Any questions? I know I talked really fast. There's a lot to talk about.
I have one question. So do I have any components that have to run inside of the cluster to make this work, or is it running purely locally?
Oh, actually, that was one of the other big things. So this all runs locally on my machine. It just connects using client Go, and it uses your local kube config to do everything. And the reason we wanted to do that is because we paid attention to what happened to Kube with the Kubernetes dashboard. And yes, you can secure it, but it is not secure in all cases. So really what we did is we said, well, limit exposure. What can you see in the cluster? Well, whatever your kube config allows. And what if I want to have a read-only view? Well, create a read-only context. I don't know. But I actually can run this in the cluster. We could actually create a deployment, put that in there, put it in a service, and then hook it up with the service account. And guess what? It can run in a cluster too.
But you don't have to, is the question.
No, you do not have to. And actually, we would advise you not to.
And if it's using my kubectl configuration, basically it operates via impersonation. So the view that it presents of the cluster to me is the view that I have access controls to see via my kubectl configuration.
100%, yes, Ken.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so this is, we've gotten a lot of good feedback on this. It has not crashed a whole bunch. There are definitely some crashing bugs in there, but this is new software. So it's at github.com/VMware/Octant. I lead the project up. I would love to talk about it or make it better. And that's my spiel.
Cool. The link to the project is in the meeting minutes. If anybody wants to check it out, it's on GitHub in the VMware repo. Thanks, Bryan. That was awesome.
All right, cool.
Anybody else? See any hands? No unmuting. Okay. All right. So now the exciting demo is over, on to boring administrative trivia. But important stuff, because we want to see what we're going to do for 116. So starting from the top, you're here. We got PDB GA. Are we looking to hit this in 116?
Yeah, I'm hoping.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think it. And try again here.
Yeah, I think you have the wrong issue linked here, though. Or no, you don't. This is the right one. Okay.
No, so I'm working on getting PDBs to GA. As I was working on this, I noticed this issue. I think it's interesting. I just wanted to throw it out there and see if anyone feels this is something we should address before taking a GA. It does seem like it's a bigger question about how we would do this in Kubernetes, but it's an interesting case. And basically, if you have Windows doesn't allow any disruptions, but the controller allows scale up, that we should scale up and then kill pods.
Okay. Well, we can rehash this. We did talk about this maybe about a year ago. And the kind of conclusion that we came to was that, I think I actually put a note on it. The design for interaction with PDB is that you should ensure enough capacity in your deployment to tolerate the planned disruption tolerance declared by your PDB. Basically, if you always want at least 2 replicas and you tolerate a loss of 2, your replica count should be 4. Your maximum available should be 2. And we kind of, I think, landed that we don't really know how this would actually work or how we would support this semantic. If we want to bring it back up and try to think of it's kind of a little bit of a redesign because it was never really designed to do what PDBs in general and eviction in general was never really designed to do what this user is asking for. What they, if I remember correctly, what they were asking for is, if I set a PDB of 0 and then I do an eviction, the system somehow detects that the PDB of 0 would be violated by this eviction, then starts a pod prior to doing the eviction, which is just something like the system in general isn't designed to do. If we want to block PDB GA on this and eviction GA on this, that's fine, but we probably are going to have to reach out to SIG scheduling. It would touch to make this happen would touch more than just the workloads APIs or the eviction policies, I think.
Yeah, my thought was that we proceed to GA regardless of this. I just wanted to raise the question if anyone disagreed.
All right. I mean, the link to the issues here, if anyone has any thoughts that wants to speak on them now, feel free to use the time. If people want to go and chime in on the issue and say, hey, well, wait a minute, before we do this, maybe we should think about this again, it's fine. Because once we GA it, there's no, like, the next thing will be V2, and V2 is a long way away. Okay, if nothing else on this one, then cron job. This does not work. There was a request for some potential changes to cron job. In particular, it's what they want is called a catch-up concurrency policy. And conceptually, from the design, what this would look like is, so you have a cron schedule, right? And it's based on cron tab. If for some reason when the system is down, certain schedules are missed. So let's say I run something daily and my system's down for 3 days. In the event that 3 of those daily schedules are missed, when the system comes back online, we will somehow detect that and then launch 3 jobs based on some policy in order to catch up to the current cron schedule. Matt had some feedback that, you know, you could use Airflow for this. And my kind of thing was like, yeah, if you want the functionality of kind of a DAG scheduler or a workflow scheduler, which it seems like this is meant to implement, we've got Airflow, which is community, you know, pretty robust, battle tested enough, contributed by Airbnb. And there's some people at Google that have worked on a Kubernetes, along with Bloomberg, a Kubernetes operator that allows Airflow to run DAGs on top of Kubernetes natively. And then the Argo workflow, which if people are familiar with Kubeflow, is something that tries to be a cloud or a Kubernetes native workflow orchestrator, is kind of a thing that does that. There's some kind of technical concerns that I have about, like, if we did this, like, how do we ever guarantee that the cron job ever actually catches up? Like, you know, so depending on what you've actually scheduled, it may be completely infeasible for the cron job controller to ever launch enough jobs to catch back up to the schedule. And then, like, really conceptually, cron job is kind of like based on executing on a cron tab like schedule, and there's no catch up in that kind of paradigm. That being said, like, if we think as a SIG that it's worth exploring and it's a feature that's kind of broadly useful to everybody, I don't want to, like, be obstructionist or block anybody from moving forward. If, you know, it's like we really think this is hugely valuable and needs to be implemented as a base feature on top of the workloads APIs because it's, you know, generally good for the community, then, you know, I don't want to be like, we shouldn't do that. On the other side, though, if we need something that does this, I think the guidance from SIG architecture would probably be, can you do this out of tree? Like, could we sponsor this as inside of our SIG as like a custom controller built using either Operator Kit or Kubebuilder, which is probably just Kubebuilder at this point, and host it that way as opposed to doing it in tree, which is something else I think we would want to consider. But I just kind of wanted to bring it up here and make sure, because it didn't look like there was a lot of feedback from anybody other than Janet, Matt, and myself. And I'd like to get at least, you know, well, Tomas, did CC Mayak, but I'd like to get Mayak's opinion on it and people who are more actively working with Job, just to see if there's any dissent to this, or what.
So yeah, to add a little bit on, I haven't got a chance to read through the proposal yet. I only heard about the topic shortly from Thomas when I returned. I literally returned from over a month PTO just last week. I'm still catching up with stuff. I'll definitely leave my own comment. But from the discussions, I'm leaning towards what you just said, Ken, with regards to, I'm not sure if it's a good fit for cron jobs. It should rather be act and react immediately rather than in the past. But I'll leave a more thorough thoughts in the issue itself.
Okay. Whatever we decide, I'd like to try to give feedback and close it out so we don't leave Colorful. I believe that's the guy. Their name is Colorful. Yeah. So we don't leave him or her. I'm not sure whether it's a guy or a girl hanging, and it's been about 27 days. So I'd like to kind of close it out for him. So if we can, but say a week or two, get anybody's feedback in and then make a decision.
Sure thing. Thanks.
Cool. Okay. What's next? Just wanted a health check on Sidecar, particularly as it pertains to 116, if we were going to try to go for that. Joseph, are you here? You are.
Hello. Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Do you think you're going to hit 116, and do you need any support from us to do it?
I'm mainly just waiting for reviews at the moment. We've got a API PR that's been open for a while. I think Octant was meant to look at that, but I think he's been on holiday for a while, so I don't think he's had a chance really. And then we've got a PR with the kubelet changes, which also haven't managed to get anyone to have a look at that yet. I might start pinging SIG nodes mailing list or something, but any assistance on getting reviews done will be appreciated.
Okay, cool. And that's your goal is to hit alpha at 116.
Yeah, that was the goal.
Yeah, cool. I can see what I can do to try to ping people. And Janet, if you can try to ping some people to see if we can get the reviews in. I'm sure it's not because people are ignoring it so much as everybody's really busy pretty much all the time. But let's try to hit that for alpha for 116. Janet, I think you were the one who brought up TT after finished controller for pods. This is an implementation based on the design you offered a year or two ago?
Yeah. So I'm trying to get this in for 116. And I think Tomasz has reviewed my earlier PR for TTL for jobs. So maybe Tomasz, you can also take a look at the PR. I put it in the meeting notes.
Sure. I'm a bit late on all the notifications from GitHub, so definitely helps to have a link for the PR, and I will review it. I think this will be also useful. You recall how we leave evicted spot around, if you have a replication controller and it leaves evicted pods lying there if kubelet fails them and nobody has ever deleted them. I think this could be actually useful for that case as well. So I will review it, and when we have it, we can talk about the evicted use case.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing for us to do for general cluster stability.
Yeah, that as well.
And Jen, you're targeting this for 116?
Yes.
So is it going to be?
Sorry?
Will it be alpha or beta, or just GA?
It's still alpha. So I'm trying to get this in. So in 117, I can bring the TTL controller to beta.
Okay. So it'll go alpha is once, okay. And you're going to introduce it with a feature gate on it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That'll be actually probably very useful for the number of clusters that we've seen who've gotten into trouble because of GC issues. Okay, and the last thing was the stateful set max unavailable. Is Mayank here today? He's not. Okay. I think we're going to target a 116 alpha for this. From what Mayank said, he's looking for one of us to go through and act the enhancement pull request as implementable so he can move forward for 116 alpha. My offline feedback was, if you're ready to move forward with implementation, I don't think you should block on it. If there's, I'm looking for the PR that he has open with the enhancement move to implementable, which I can't find. I'll try to collect that and post it, and I guess for next meeting, make it more public so people can leave any feedback they have before he starts, opening a PR. But at this point, I think we're going to move to 116 alpha as the target for that. And yeah, I'll try to sync up with him offline and finish that up. Okay. Does anyone have anything else they want to add for discussion?
Yeah, I just wanted to sync back. I think I proposed like 2 weeks back or sometime like that. We talked about stabilizing the workload controllers with regards to admission controllers that could modify the pod template.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in the meantime, David Eads came to me and he proposed we could do the same with server-side apply and keeping the owner references in metadata. So I will be also looking into that. So I just wanted to briefly check in on that.
Do you think that, so I remember Janet and I talking to Daniel about that same thing. And I think if I remember correctly, and Janet, correct me if I remember incorrectly, that the conclusion we came to is yes, that might work, but it requires server-side apply to go GA. And the concern was that the time frame for that was kind of far out. At this point, maybe it's not as far out as it was back then. So that might be a good thing.
Yeah, the time frame is closer, and I think the ask from them is that this could validate the approach they are taking, because there are still open questions about GAing the stuff.
Okay.
So maybe this could be helpful for both ways, but I still need to look into it. I just wanted to update that I didn't forget about it.
Okay. Do you know when it hits beta?
I don't know, actually.
All right, I can sync.
I checked it like a week ago, and yeah.
Okay. All right. Sounds cool.
But I think I heard like the time frame, like the end of the year, like. But it might be the GA. But definitely nothing official, so it's probably like targeting the end of the year to close it. I will think back when I actually try the stuff. But I think it's alpha right now in the master. At least it was when I was looking at it.
Yeah, I know they merged it. I just didn't know what state it was in, or if it was generally available on like a cluster by default or any other distribution. But I mean, that doesn't, without respect to that, it doesn't really affect that as a plan. But all right, that sounds cool.
Yeah, I think end of the year is probably soonest that we can, even our work can be like stabilized and ready for merge. So I think the schedules can pretty meet. Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Okay. All right. If nobody has anything else to add, then I guess we'll give everybody about 20 minutes back. Again, we've moved the meetings to bi-weekly, so there will be no meeting next week, but there will be a meeting the following week. Add any issues or demos or anything you want to the meeting minutes, and we'll meet up to schedule those. And I guess see everybody in 2 weeks this time. And Bryan, thanks again for the awesome demo.
Thanks.
All right. Talk to you guys later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
See you.